Hello guys and gals, and welcome. So today I want to talk about rune words. This is going to be a new series of mine. I'm going to go over each individual rune word, and we're going to talk about the uses of those rune words, what they might be used for, what they could be used for, etc. You know, what particular characters they could be useful on. And today's rune word that we're going to be talking about is Crescent Moon. Crescent Moon is a fairly easy to make rune word. It only has one higher rune in it. Some people would even call it a mid-rune, but it's ShaelUmTir. Is a very nice rune for a lot of different reasons, so it may be a little bit of an expensive rune word if you're, desperate for, a couple runes to put in your equipment. But Crescent Moon is a very amazing rune word for a lot of reasons. One reason in particular is the 7% chance to cast a level 13 static field on striking. But before we go through the process of talking about the rune word, let's go over what variables the rune word has and what weapons the rune word can be placed in. So I've pulled up the website here, and we're going to take a look at the rune word on the screen. So we've got 10% chance to cast level 17 Chain Lightning on striking. That is always static. We've got 7% chance to cast level 13 Static Field on striking, which is always static. 20% increased attack speed, which is always nice to have on a weapon. 180 to 220% enhanced damage. So a little bit of a variable there on how much damage it can get. Ignores target's defense, which is absolutely amazing for just about anybody who doesn't want to build attack rating, but keep in mind that ignores target's defense does not work on bosses. Negative 35% to enemy lightning resistance, which is very amazing, and we'll come back to that later. 25% chance of open wounds, which is also very amazing. Plus 9 to 11 magic absorb, which is pretty awesome, and plus 2 to mana after each kill, which is also a good thing to have. Level 18 summon Spirit Wolf charges, which is not really that important, but it might be fun just to play around with. Now, the important thing about this weapon is that it is usable in axes, swords, or polearms. That means that you cannot put this in a spear. Keep that in mind. So if you are looking for a merc weapon, a cheap merc weapon, this one's actually not bad at all, and I'll explain. But this is also great for, as it says right here, for lightning sorceresses, holy shock paladins, and it also has the really nice static field. So let's go back to Diablo here, and we're going to talk about this weapon and why this weapon in particular is a pretty decent merc weapon, as well as good for other characters like a Conviction Paladin or a Holy Freeze Paladin. I mean, Holy Shock Paladin. So right off the bat, one thing that you'll notice is that 7% chance to cast level 13 Static Field. Now, Static Field is the Sorceress ability, and because it is a nice Sorceress ability to reduce the enemy's HP by 25% every time it's cast. Now it's 25% off of their current HP, not 25% off of their max HP. And this is important because Static Field is has diminishing returns as it decreases the monster's health. However, if we go take a look at Static Field, we will find out that a level 13 Static Field has a range of 11.3 yards. And to put that in perspective, Conviction on my Paladin has a range of 13.3 yards. So we are already looking at almost the same range as Conviction Aura on the Paladin every single time this triggers, which means that it will remove 25% of the monster's HP on that first cast, no matter what, on everything within range. And it is absolutely excellent to have on a Mercenary because it reduces that monster's HP very quickly, and it triggers multiple times. Now, each time it triggers, it does have a diminishing effect, and there is an important thing to note about Static Field is that it is limited to the amount of life that it can reduce off of the monster's hit points in each difficulty setting. So in normal difficulty, it can actually reduce a monster's life all the way down to 1%, which is really awesome. In Nightmare difficulty, it will only work to 33% of the monster's life, which basically means you can reduce 67% of the monster's HP away. In Hell difficulty, it will reduce 50% of the monster's life, which means you can clear 50% off of the monster's HP, which is pretty awesome. Now, there are some very interesting uses for this weapon, and the negative resistance actually does help the polearm, or the weapon, the negative 35% enemy lightning resistance actually does help static field work better. There's an entire calculation revolving around static field, but for the most part, just believe that if you have a mercenary, and let's say he's in a group of cows, and there's like 100 cows, and he triggers his static field on those 100 cows, and every single cow has, I don't know, let's say 10,000 hit points. And you remove 25% off of those cows. Each cow loses 25% of their hit points. That is a massive amount of damage from 100 cows. And it's going to hit all of them because it is a huge static field effect. Now, this isn't like the most amazing ability in the world because it's not going to kill anything. Static field will never kill something. That is the interesting thing about static field. It is just a way to reduce the amount of HP that a monster has very quickly. It's very useful on bosses, for instance. You run up real quick, you cast your static field, and it reduces all their HP by huge percentages. It's very similar to Crushing Blow, and it can be stacked with Crushing Blow. In this particular instance, I could have a armor on my Merc that has Crushing Blow, like for instance Rattle Cage, or a helmet with Crushing Blow, and like Gilliam's face, and he could stack the two static field and Crushing Blow together. Now, there's other things on this weapon that make it very interesting for both a Holy Shock Paladin or a Lightning Sorceress or a Mercenary. The second thing is the increased attack speed. It's very nice to have that increased attack speed on a weapon, especially for a Mercenary, because you want him to hit as fast as humanly possible. In fact, this weapon is very nicely tagged up with a Treachery for the extra attack speed, because you want him to be hitting faster and triggering that static field more often. The Ignore Target's defense is very nice because it means that he is going to be hitting his targets pretty much no matter what. He's not going to be missing a lot on trash. Now, like I said before, the Ignore Target's defense does not work on bosses, but that's fine. He can just use his regular attack rating for that. The negative 35% enemy lightning resistance is going to have a huge effect on his static field damage, and it is also going to increase the damage of his level 17 chain lightning, which has a 10% chance to cast, and you'll see that fairly often with a 10% chance to cast. It's not an amazing amount of damage, but it's just extra damage that gets added on. He also has the 25% chance of open wounds, which is amazing to stop monsters from regenerating. If you're unaware of this, any monster that is suffering from the open wounds effect will have basically no regeneration for 8 seconds. And this is very useful on things like Ubers, especially if you can manage to keep your Merc alive. 11 Magic Absorb is definitely going to help him stay alive also, because that Magic Absorb is going to heal him. So basically what it does is Magic Absorb essentially cancels out 11 damage and then gives it back to you as a heal. So every time you take a point of damage in that particular category, it will automatically remove it from the calculation and then heal you for that same amount. So it's essentially 22 protection versus that element. The tuna mana after each kill, of course, does not help him, but if you were using a paladin or if you were using a sorceress, tuna mana after each kill would be very nice. It's actually one of the best ways to restore mana on caster classes, but it's also helpful on melees as well. Now, this particular weapon, as you can see, I created it with an Ethereal Cryptic Axe. It just happens to be that one of my friends found a 3-socket Ethereal Cryptic Axe, and I was like, hey, that would be a good base for a Crescent Moon. Now, I'm on a particular character that's not a ridiculous mana hog, where there may be other options that you might want to go with, like an Insight or an Infinity or various other options like that. But keep in mind that I'm a Vengeance Paladin. I already have Conviction, I don't need an Infinity, and I don't really have mana issues, so I don't really need an Insight. So the Crescent Moon makes more sense for my particular character because it allows me to utilize my Conviction and just have a nice weapon on him. Eventually, I'll replace it with something better. There are quite a few other options which I could go with. I was thinking about an Obedience, or rather several other Rune words. But this was just an easy one that I could make that has made a big difference in my Mercenary's killing speed. And this video is about Crescent Moon. It is not about the other rune words. Now, keep in mind that if you were to put this in a one-handed weapon, you could use this with a shield. So this particular character might get good use out of a Crescent Moon. And if I had another rune laying around, I might make him one. But he's not using a Crescent Moon right this second. The very interesting thing about Crescent Moon is it's kind of a lower level rune word with a level requirement of only the highest rune in the rune word, which remember that the level requirement of any rune word is always the highest rune in the rune word, and because that is the rune is the highest level rune, we know that the level requirement of the rune is 47. So the level requirement of this particular item, the reason why it is higher than level 47 is because it's a cryptic axe. So mine is level 59 because I made it in a higher level item. But the rune only has a level requirement of 47. So if you were to make this into a lower level item, one that doesn't have such a high level requirement, you would be able to use this at a much lower level. For instance, if I was rich enough, I would have a couple runes laying around, which I do have a pole rune, a Zod rune laying around, and I've got some Kos and some Ios and whatnot, but no just laying around. I would probably have those socketed in my equipment at this point, and and I don't. So it's a very interesting rune word. It has some very interesting uses, and I promised I'd talk about the uses. So a Holy Shock Paladin would get a lot of good use out of a Crescent Moon rune word, especially in a Naga or a Berserker's Axe, depending on what level they are. It's definitely a good placeholder weapon until you manage to get yourself a better weapon for your Holy Shock Paladin. The negative 35% enemy lightning resistance is actually really nice for a sorceress, specifically until you can get something better. That negative 35% lightning resistance is going to have a huge effect on the amount of damage that you can do. And if you pair it with something like the Griffin's Eye Diadem, which also has negative lightning resistance and plus lightning skill damage, you can really stack up the lightning damage as high as you can get it. Now, granted, there are better choices. For instance, once you get into a higher bracket, you can go with an Eschudas, which has I believe it's lightning skill damage, but it's not negative 35%. Now, keep in mind that this negative 35% enemy lightning resist only applies to you, or if it's on your Mercenary, it only applies to the Mercenary. And this is important because a lot of people will mistake this for something that applies to them. So, for instance, because my Mercenary is using this, if he hits a target, it does not give me the negative 35% enemy lightning resistance. For me to get that negative 35% lightning resistance, I would have to be wielding the item myself. And that means that I would be running around smacking things for massive amounts of damage with my Vengeance. And you'll see that the Vengeance damage actually is extraordinary with the Crescent Moon. And I know this is an Ethereal item, but you can see here, I can pretty much one-shot just about anything with this, depending on how the damage rolls. And my poor little Merc is like, give me back my weapon. Anyway, this is a very interesting rune word, and I hope that you will consider this when you are determining what weapon you would like to use on, maybe for instance, your Holy Shock Paladin, your Lightning Sorceress, or maybe even your Mercenary. One very interesting use for this that I found that worked very well until I found a Magic Find polearm, because my Necromancer is my Magic Finder, is I used this on my Necromancer, and what I did is I allowed my Mercenary to static field about 2 or 3 times, which was very quick, by the way, and once he static field about 2 or 3 times, I used 1 Corpse Explosion, and 1 Corpse Explosion would kill everything, because if you're aware of how Corpse Explosion works, is most of the time it does not kill in 1 Corpse Explosion. It usually requires 2 or 3, sometimes even 4, depending on the resistances of the monsters. But when you have your Mercenary spamming a level 13 static field on everything nearby, their health is softened. They're obviously not going to die, but their health goes down from 100% to 75%, and then it goes from 75% to like 62 2%, and so forth and so on. And it does diminish as each time it triggers, but I can get them in hell difficulty down to 50% by using static field. And as soon as it triggers once or twice, I'll pop my corpse explosion, and everything dies in one corpse explosion. And it increased my kill time on my necromancer by massive proportions. The only reason I swapped out from it is specifically because I thought it would work really well on my Conviction Paladin, because he's bringing down all the resistances of the monsters nearby. And number 2, I found a magic find polearm, and I was having some fun basically using the extra magic find on my necromancer, which I thought was pretty cool. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, and keep an eye out for more of these Runeword videos as I continue.